Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Mike Norvell, Florida State, maybe building a little bit of momentum in the 2026 cycle. I think a really big commitment. Four-star wide receiver Brandon Bennett from American Heritage committing to Florida State. I want to start with this idea. We need to see more of these recruiting wins from Mike Norvell and this new coaching staff. You look at going up against Florida, going up against Georgia. I mean, Brandon Bennett was a guy that was coveted by most of the SEC. Look, if Florida State wants to get back where they belong in the college football landscape, of which I believe is a program that's competing for conference championships and competing in the playoffs, this is where it starts. Winning recruiting battles for these kind of football players. As you get into Brandon Bennett, the first thing you got to know is speed. We're talking not just fast. We're talking about one of the fastest players in the country, 10-4 in the 100-meter dash. And here's what excites me about Brandon Bennett. Look, is there a little bit of one-trick pony to him as we sit right now? Yeah, probably. You turn on the film and say, kind of just a vertical guy as we sit right now. Really intriguing aspects to his game that excite me. How fast he can get going to that top gear. I think one of the most overblown things we talk about with these kids at the high school ranks, track and field times, especially when the track and field times don't exactly match up with what you see on the film. Hey, it's one thing to run a 10-7 in the spring. Can you translate that speed to being a good football player in the fall? A lot of players don't. I think Brandon Bennett does, and it's because of how quickly he can really start rolling. I mean, the acceleration that this kid brings, the ability to go 0 to 60, that's what excites me the most. And I think that's going to translate in a lot of different ways. Number one, in your route trees, getting in and out of breaks and creating separation. Yards after the catch. He's not a massive yards after the catch guy at the high school ranks, but because of that speed, he's a guy that can make game-changing plays every single time he has the football in his hands. There's a lot to like about Brandon Bennett's game. I think he certainly is going to give you that vertical presence in this Florida State offense, but I think there's a little bit more to his game that he can provide Florida State over the next couple of years. And again, what I would stress here is you go head-to-head with Florida, you go head-to-head with Georgia, and you win out for him. That's just something we haven't said enough of for Florida State over the last couple of years. Want to get a little bit more into Brandon Bennett? Want to talk about where Florida State is going on the recruiting trail before we get into it? As always, to the Florida State fans, I appreciate you guys. And it's frustrating because I wanted to do this commitment breakdown earlier. The StreamYard wasn't working for me, so I apologize. It's coming to y'all late Thursday night. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. It's been a blast talking this team through the ups, through the downs, and the amount of support y'all have shown, many of y'all for multiple years. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Brandon Bennett. And again, I think you talk about the long speed. That's what you love the most. I think there's another aspect where there's a lot of versatility here. I think he can be a boundary wide receiver because of the verticality he brings, but I also look at him and say spends a lot of time in the slot as well. Versatility, game-breaking speed, that's what you like. You get into the things you want to see a little bit more development from. I think it just starts with getting the body right. I think there's an element of physicality that he can bring to his game a little bit more, which we expect to take place, as you go into your senior year, as you become an early enrollee and put weight on the right way, so to speak. There's some development that needs to be had, but you can't teach the one elite trait that he has, and that is legitimate game-breaking speed. The other thing I like about this one is I like the fit in the Gus Malzahn offense where, hey, there's two things that we know Gus Malzahn is going to want to do as it relates to wide receiver play. We know he wants to run the football. We know that. He wants to use a lot of pre-snap motion, and he wants to work vertically a lot. I think Brandon Bennett's going to be successful in both of those ways. He's a guy that you can give end arounds to. He's a guy that you can use in motion because of the speed he has, but you also use him vertically down the field. This is something we've talked about, not just chasing the guys with the most amount of stars next to their name. And that doesn't mean you don't go after the top guys in the class, by the way. But what I mean is make sure you're getting good football players who also fit what you want to do. And I think Brandon Bennett's a wide receiver that he's a good football player. He also fits what Florida State wants to do on offense. Another storyline I want to talk about is Jaden O'Neal. And this is a guy that I think Florida State fans need to get to know. The quarterback recruiting, I'll say this, a little bit frustrating. You know, you have the years you have with Jordan Travis, and it felt like Mike Norvell could not parlay the success. I mean, the success that Jordan Travis had in terms of just consistently getting better within this program under the tutelage of Mike Norvell, that should have translated better to the recruiting trail. And it kind of did briefly with a guy like Luke Kromanoke. You want to see the quarterback recruiting get back to how it should be. I think Florida State's really happy with the early enrollee freshman in Kevin Sperry. This is probably the name to know. You know, Florida State made some buzz with Keyshawn Henderson. He looks like he's going to stick to Houston. Made a little bit of a push at Landon Duckworth. Sounds like he's going to be between South Carolina and Auburn. Jaden O'Neal, especially if Bo Bentley commits to Oklahoma, you're probably going to see Jaden O'Neal open his recruitment back up. And here's the thing I'll say. Even if Bo Bentley chooses LSU, I still think Florida State should be pushing for Jaden O'Neal. There is this conception that Florida State shouldn't go after guys because they can't go out and win those battles. I don't believe that. You know, I look at Florida State and say, hey, Florida State should be you should want Florida State to think, hey, we can go head to head with anybody in the country and go win out. Look at Jaden O'Neal and say that this is probably the quarterback to know in the 2026 cycle. Now, really fascinating kid. He is kind of a prototype pro style guy. He's 6'3", he's 215, really thick lower half, big time arm. Is there a little bit of a funky fit in the Gus Malzahn offense? Yeah, maybe, because I don't think he's the most dynamic with the football in his hands. I don't think he's the most dynamic getting outside the pocket. This is what I'll say with Jaden O'Neal. If you can put the correct pieces around Jaden O'Neal, I think this kid can be really good. Do I think he's a guy that can be good or really good when things aren't perfect? That's probably to be determined. But this is a guy that if you can give him a solid run game and you can give him a solid offensive line and pass protection, if you can allow this kid to sit in the pocket and go cut up teams, I think he can. Because I think from a pure pocket passer standpoint, he's probably one of the better ones in the class. We'll see what Florida State decides to do at the quarterback spot. Jaden O'Neal, certainly a name to know. I think this is big. And if you're a Florida State fan, you're hoping we can parlay this momentum into a couple more recruiting wins where it's like, hey, if you want to get back to Florida State belongs, you got to go head to head, with teams like Florida and Georgia and go win out. You did it right here with Brandon Bennett. Let's see you do it more for the rest of the summer. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.